Hello, bonjour. Je m'appelle Priscilla et ceci est Mom Study Abroad Diary.
Honorable Member Mr. Kmich for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, your department tabled documents with Parliament that show that 4.9 million visas are going to expire between September 2024 and December 2025. How will we know how many of those actually wind up leaving?
As you noted, MP Kmich, when people come here, in many of their visa documents, they undertake to leave. As part of the levels plan, there will be some visas that are temporary in nature that will not be renewed, and those people, when they undertook to come here, will be expected to leave, and that is simply a fact. We'll have to monitor that carefully. There are many measures within our department to monitor these things, but it's one that,
Minister,
given the volume in question, it's something that we'll have to be very careful in supervising.
1 second, Mr. Coach, I stop the work. Let him finish. And you can ask. Would appreciate that. Okay, so I'll go to Minister. You have finished your remarks. Okay, Honourable Member Kmich, please.
Minister, I wasn't asking about whether they will leave or not. I'm asking you how will you ensure that a person whose visa has expired will leave? We know that just on study permits, there are 766,000 expiring by the end of December 2025. How will your department ensure that at the end of those study permit periods, those persons will leave?
Again, there are many ways that people leave the country, Tom. The vast majority leave voluntarily, and that's what's expected.
So explain those ways. How will you ensure it?
We work with our partners, including CBSA, to investigate, obviously, and prosecute those who violate immigration law. If someone refuses to leave, they're in violation of the law. And CBSA, after due process, has the legal obligation to remove people. Again, this isn't something that is taken lightly, but in the vast majority of cases, those people that have come here temporarily and do not have the right to stay, in fact, leave.
So then my next question will be, your plan calls for a cap on international students, 485,000 2024, 437,000 2025. There's been adjustments to those. So obviously there's a discrepancy between the two. So how many do you project will leave the country then at the end of December 2025? All 766,000? What's the proportion? What are the forecasts the department has?
You'll have to be clear on that. A discrepancy between what and what?
Between the number of people who will be allowed into the country and then the number of people who will be on a study permit that's expiring. So those who are expiring the end of December 2025, how many of them will actually leave? Are you saying 100% will be expected to leave, or are you going to send CBSA to chase all 766,000?
You know that is not what happens. There are a number of things that occur. Some people actually get renewals. Some people get postgraduate work permits and stay a longer period. And we do work with CBSA to monitor these things. And when Statistics Canada reports on these, they take into account a whole variety of factors in estimating how many people are here and how many people have left.
So at the end of this year, 2024, how many international students do you expect to leave, and how many have left so far when their study permits expired?
How many have left as
so far?
Of November today? We don't
or
have
October
that number.
1st. Can you provide those to the committee?
I don't know. We could look into it.
Minister, how can you not know? It's in the immigration levels plan. There's a bunch of charts on page 22 starting about temporary resident immigration to Canada, persons who are in the country. It's in the immigration levels plan. It's in there. So how can you not know what that number would be? There's an order paper question, these government documents that were signed by your parliamentary secretary that were tabled with Parliament that has the numbers. So there's supposed to be expiring study permits in December, 84,642, and in November, 36,130. In October, 10,182. In the month before, 127,348. So how many of those people are still in the country? How many have received the renewal? And how many of them have CBSA now looking at them?
What I can provide to you as a number is the expected decrease over that period over the 3-year period, which is about 450 the first year, 450 the next year. That's net, incoming and outcoming, with a slight increase in 2027.
So so how are you going to track then those whose work permits are expiring by the end of 2025? Again, it's in the hundreds of thousands. You're not giving me much confidence or Canadians confidence that you have a plan, because we have a breakdown by month how many student visas and work visas are expiring. And you haven't provided any information on the means. How are you going to do it? You say you have partner organizations, you're working with people. What are you actually doing? What's the process? How are you going to ensure people abide by the visa conditions?
As I said to you before, just like the vast majority of people that come to the country on a temporary basis, the vast majority leave. In some cases, increasingly many, I will concede, people decide to choose. They are in a situation of irregularity in that case. Once they have exhausted their remedies, they are removed by CBSA.
So that's interesting, because you've made public statements repeatedly claiming and saying and alleging, based on IRCC data, that is not what's going on. And that's why the IRB now has a record number of backlogged applications for asylum. And you have said that tens of thousands of them are actually international students who are staying longer to applying for asylum. And you're claiming they don't have a legitimate claim to make. That those are your quotes, the headlines you're generating by doing communications out there. So are you saying you don't have a plan, that this is part of your plan to have an increasing backlog at the IRB to deal with it?
Minister, you please respond.
There are an increasing number of international students making asylum claims, I think with very little hope, given their conditions. They, whether you like it or not, are entitled to a form of due process in this country. I don't think you would purport to deny it to them. Are there things we can do to make sure that's more streamlined? I would encourage you to follow the next few weeks as we propose more amendments to the immigration system and the asylum system. But let's recall that every party in this House, except for the Liberal Party, voted down our asylum reforms in the budget. A bit shameful, considering that Conservatives had proposed these in earlier years, but you chose to play politics about it. This is a system that is in need of reform, and it's in need of reform in the right way.
Thank you. Now we will go to MP Kwan for 6 minutes. MP Kwan, please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister and the officials for being here today. Speaking on the levels plan, Minister, it was shocking, to be honest with you, with the about face that the government took. In fact, there are a number of migrant workers who are here today, and they responded to your announcement. A group, an open letter was sent with some 185 organizations or individuals has signed this open letter in response to the levels plan and refuting the arguments that the government had put forward and calling for a change of approach. As well, the migrant network folks have actually put on social media point-by-point response to the Prime Minister's shameful video. And some of the points now highlight here, and I'd like to seek your response. They say that migrants are not disposable economic units. Immigrants are not taps to be turned on and turned off, that they are people with rights, families, dreams, and potential who are promised equal rights and fairness, and Canada is uprooting millions of people who have built a life here. They further say that migrants aren't a drain on the economy, they're adding to it and underwriting the government's public services that they pay into but cannot access. International students alone contribute $31 billion to Canada's GDP in 2022. And migrants fill critical roles in healthcare, agriculture, technology, and forming the backbone of many sectors. They noted also, and this is common knowledge, that since at least 2008, the Conservative and Liberals have been bringing more temporary migrants than permanent residents. And this is an intentional shift to reduce people's rights and to make migrants more vulnerable. Even though the government acknowledges exploitation, but they are punishing those who are exploited being exploited, Minister. And what really is needed is guaranteed permanent status for all and reining corporate interests that are profiteering off basic needs, and for the government to actually truly invest in housing, healthcare, infrastructure for all residents of the country once and for all, and not blame migrant workers. What's your response to them?
I mean, there's a lot of statements in there that I wouldn't disagree with. I agree with the fact that there has been increased volume that has impacted people in this country, fairly or unfairly. But it's one, I think, that we've almost taken for granted. And the reality with people that are here temporarily is it has to actually mean something. It's not an automatic guarantee to become a permanent resident. I think to some extent a lot of institutions have entertained explicitly or implicitly a sense of false hope that people will become immediately a Canadian citizen. My heart does go out to those who have had that false hope entertained, but the reality is that not everyone can stay here. Every time I've tried to put a measure in place to make sure that we are reining in some of the unsustainable volumes in areas of my department that have perhaps gotten overheated, it's been with an effort to focus and make sure that we're focusing on people that are already here. It is not a right to become a permanent resident. It is not a right to become a Canadian citizen. Otherwise, you dilute the value of it. And that's something that I firmly believe in. It doesn't mean at the same time that you treat people unfairly. And those that have undertaken in their own visas that they will leave at the end of this, obviously have to respect that. But there are nuances in here. That is why in this plan, I made sure that there was a good 40% of the plan that was focused on in Canada Draws, so that we are bringing in the skilled people that the country needs. And I think that is something, well, we make sure that those that do have responsibility over, including the federal government, but also provincial governments that go out and pick and choose and have their own programs of bringing people in, focus on the domestic pool of talent that's here, often young, making the workforce younger. So it is challenging, but it's one I think that is not couched in absolutes. We have to make sure that we are flexible and making sure that we are reducing the volumes in a fair and managed and controlled way. And I think fundamentally the levels plan that we put forward this year is one that is reasonable and shows to Canadians that we've been listening.
Well, actually, Minister, you are one of those people that actually gave people false hope on the regularization program. This supposing broad regularization program came to be not. And in fact, the levels plan, I don't know if it's some sort of joke. The plan actually in 2015 calls for 50 people to be regularized. What sort of joke is that? And the truth of the matter is, you talk about providing provinces and territories to have the ability to make their decisions. On your plan, you're actually reducing provincial nominees. As an example, successive Liberal and Conservative governments knew and continue to increase migrant workers with temporary status while reducing permanent resident status. And this is not an accident. And at the same time as well, successive governments have allowed for institutions to use international students as a cash cow. And now you have a housing crisis and you blame them as though somehow they created the housing crisis, when in fact successive governments abdicated their responsibility and entirely just relied on the private sector to provide the housing that they need. So that is the reality. So when are you actually going to take up responsibility and do what is right?
I think you meant 2025 and not 2015, but the reality is that on, for example, the provincial nominee program, provinces have been coming to me begging for more spaces, but then turning around and blaming us for immigration. I think to some extent we've, as a society, have gotten addicted to temporary fixes, and it's something that we owe it to Canadians to rein in. And this is a plan and a policy that I put into place when it came, for example, to half of the temporary residents that are in Canada, include international students themselves and the postgraduate permits that they get, a plan to reduce that in a responsible way. And we've seen the impacts that that's had on rental prices. We've seen the pressure easing that has had on the economy. And I think that's an important reality. We cannot have an unlimited volume without losing the value of what is immigration. The levels that we put forward this year are ones that are still ambitious. They still plan for a growing economy, but it isn't everyone that has the right to bring in whoever they want, whenever they want. And my job, you're right, is much more than simply snapping a passport at the border. It involves engaging with community members, with provinces, with territories to look at their volumes and work with them. I think provinces, frankly, have been irresponsible in the immigration sphere, and it's why we cut their allotments in half, with the idea that we would work with them if they were really to do their fair share in taking their fair share of asylum seekers for those that are those provinces that aren't Quebec and Ontario.
Have you actually done an analysis of what the economic impacts would be with this levels plan in terms of the reduction in the number of people that are needed to for various different industries and what the implications are for institutions? Have you actually done a economic analysis with your plan? And if yes, will you table it?
I think we've. Is there a separate, discrete study done by our department? There are ones that are done in the context of preparing the levels plans, but I've read a number of studies about the impacts. And in some cases, there will be some pain, and it's an important adjustment for society and for example, institutions that have, I think, unfairly relied on international students to bolster their own balance sheets.
Well, just to note, $31 billion in terms of Canada's GDP from international students alone, and that's based on the 2022 numbers. I'm talking about IRCC, your own department's analysis. Have you done one, and will you table it?
My question to you is, and the institutions perhaps that you're making yourself the voice for, is who's going to pay for all the asylum claims that come out of those institutions as a result of people not being able to get their postgraduate permits and not leaving the country? Are those institutions paying for it?
So
Thank you very much. The time is up, and we'll go to
If you are, then tell the
MP
United
Khanna.
Nations.
MP
That's